This was supposed to be the time of the individual. We are called, a bit derogatory, we're called the I generation. We're told the generation that focuses too much on self. We're the generation that's focused inward, that's selfish, that's this, that's that. Here's the issue. I think we're not I enough. I think we're not self-focused enough. The biggest proof is politics. Politics is when we start thinking that somebody else will solve our problems. And yes, government has a role to play, and yes, it does make a difference. But in an era that focuses on an individual, and where each person is called upon for self-help and self-exploration, and you look at the nuttiness, the way people, still see politics as the solution, as if it's a savior. I ask myself, what happened to this being the generation where people will finally actualize themselves and will no longer look for saviors? Karl Marx argued that religion is opium of the masses. You might remember that expression, and that is pretty much the idea that strong people don't need to rely on a religion and believe there's a God in the sky, some made-up pathetic idea, but rather they can accept that there is no God and they could still take accountability for their actions. And weak people choose religion. And I hear the argument, although I think it's equally as convenient to not choose religion and then be accountable to nobody, so I'm not sure why choosing religion and being accountable is any weaker than choosing nothing and not being accountable, but fine, let's say there is some validity to the argument. So what do people do instead? It's not as if when you take religion away from a person that you take all religion away from them. You take spiritual religion away from them, but they replace it with another religion, for example, sport. Freedom of expression, fashion, addiction, celebrity focus, gossip, money, fame, popularity, success. Each person sets themselves a religion. I don't believe there's a single person in this world that's not religious. Every person in this world has a religion. The only question is the religion about them or about a being bigger than them? So you see, that's why the whole argument about whether religion is good for the world or not is such a, I don't know if it's false, it's not a full argument, because it's not as if the world is split between religious people and not. Everyone's religious. Everyone's fanatical and maybe even slightly illogical about certain things. Because what really is religion, if, at least from a derogatory perspective? If you had to be Karl Marx, you would say that it's believing in something you cannot see, being devout even though it's illogical, and committing to a set of rules, even if not necessarily do you fully agree with them, but rather because you decide to buy into them. Well, everyone's like that. Every single person on this planet is religious. Some people serve the communist state. In China, there's a billion people, they're not religious, Jewish or Christian or Muslim on the most part, but they are religious. Religious about their state, religious about their pride, religious about their money, religious about, well, some of them at least, religious about making junk. Everyone's religious. And until we cannot acknowledge that we're all religious, I think we're not having an honest conversation. It's not as if because I'm sitting with a beard and a yarmulke, I'm religious, and if you don't keep Shabbos, you're not religious. No, you're religious. we're just not sure what religious you are. In other words, maybe you're as equally Jewish religious as me. Whether you keep Shabbos or not is irrelevant. But if you don't define yourself that way, then you're definitely religious some other way. Religious about certain ideas. I don't know. Animal rights, global warming, equality. You're religious about something. Because it's almost impossible for a human being to be fully logical. Life is not fully logical. There are elements of life that's logical, but there are certain areas of life that you just follow, not from a place of logic, but from a place of intuition, a place of, it's just your truth. You're religious about love. I mean, you're sticking it through, even though it technically doesn't make any sense. Biologically, the idea that a husband and wife will be loyal to each other and then focus on their kids and raise them decently and give themselves over to their kids. I don't think we would go there. I think you have certain values which don't necessarily make sense from a biological point of view, but you just do them because you are religious about certain things. You're sticking into a marriage, even if maybe it's not perfect, because you're somewhat religious about the idea of marriage. My point is, you are religious. So then you have to ask yourself, what does my religiosity go around? Does it go around a value, or does it go around whatever I'm in the mood of that day? So what's going on in America right now with the election is two religions: liberalism, or rather leftism, and populism. It's no longer liberal and conservative. It's populism versus leftism. And I'm not sure which one I can't stand more. But and they became religions. Because I'll be honest, both leftism and populism don't make any sense. They don't add up logically. Fundamentally, even the word populism is that you're just going to what's popular rather than actually what's logical. You just, going to people's emotions. And leftism is just extreme radical lack of nuance, where everything is just so black and white that it's just pathetic. And populism is a reaction to leftism, and leftism is a reaction to populism, and both of them make no sense. Sorry, I really don't buy. I look at the politics today, and there's not even logic involved. It's pure religion. It's religion. Whatever Donald Trump says, if you're a populist, you swear by it. He could say the biggest falsehood, and you swear by it. That's religion. That's not logic. And leftism and all its political correct statements of what you're allowed to say and what you're not allowed to say, and intersectionality, where each person, based on how victimized they are, that's how much justified they are to talk, and all the other nonsense that goes on in leftist ideology. It's not logical. It doesn't make any sense. The world is religious. It's too religious, I'll be honest. Like, whoa, everybody, I know that you claim that religion is on the downside and everybody's becoming more logical. No, we're not. No, we're not. What's going on in the world's conversations, what people are arguing about, is not logic. It's just base human instinct. Some people with this obsession that we all have to be equal, even if I have to smash people down. Other people with ideas of, take care of ourselves first and then let the world go to the dogs. And I don't know, just like, I'll be honest, it drives me crazy when I hear most of these ideas, because they're not ethical ideas. They don't come. I know that, lefties and populists will often claim that they have the moral code, but there's no morality there. It's just what feels right, what resonates with your sense of right and wrong, but it's not objectively right. And what's going on? It's everyone's becoming religious. But at least if you're religious, base your religion not on your feelings, but on an objective God who has objective values who don't change at the whims of society. If you're already choosing to be illogical, why in the world would you put Donald Trump or Joe Biden or God knows what, AOC, that, you know, the left-wing congresswoman in New York, Cortez, or Bernie Sanders, or any of this garbage? Why would you put that as your God? Or the DA, or the ANC, or this politician and that politician? Like, when I see people screaming about a politician, like with absolute fervor, which they would never do in the house of worship, that they would be seen as, like, you know, like, oh my gosh, you're a weirdo, right? You go to shul, Ashkenazi shul at least, everybody's sitting there quietly. And if they're a little vulnerable, they'll close their eyes and they'll put a siddur. But that's like as expressive as they'll get. You go to Sephardi shul, they're a little more expressive. You go to Christians, you know, certain kind of Christian churches, they'll start singing. They're a little more. You go to a campaign rally, and everyone's going nuts. There, you are the savior. Really? What? Really? That's what you're going to make as your religion? Or money. Let's go politics away for a second. Money. Some people have an obsession with wealth. Or if it's not money in a bank account, obsessions with possessions. They need a certain car. They just need it. And they drive and they have this experience that they've made it in the world. They've made it. Now, logically, I'm sorry for saying this, that doesn't make any sense, because objectively, a car is a tin can on wheels that drives. And as long as it's safe and secure, whether it's an Aston Martin, a Lamborghini, a Porsche, or a Toyota, it pretty much does the same thing. Okay, one's a little safer, fine. So Toyotas are just fine. They're actually more tested than Lamborghinis because there's more Toyotas on the street than Lamborghinis. But fine. But we developed a religion. In other words, we convinced ourselves, and then we convinced our children, that financial, not only stability, but success is an aspiration. So the religious person, as in the spiritual religious person, their aspiration is to, I don't know, become one with the Lord and lose passion for physicality and connect with their deeper soul. Okay, sounds all esoteric. And what's the other person sitting across them doing? I want to drive this car. I want to have enough plastic surgeries that I look this good. I want to be so and so popular. I want to get this many likes on what I post. I want to be the most popular in my group. Guys, there is no logic in any of that. You're religious about it. Why would you make your religion around that garbage? You know, I was thinking about this yesterday, about what would have happened to me if I didn't grow up religious, and specifically Chabad, as in the Chabad worldview, and my personality. How would I have ended up? The reason I say Chabad, because it has a fair balance of strong values, but openness to the world. That's that area specifically, and a strong mystical element as well. How would I end up? I'm pretty sure that I would be an idealistic nutcase with some very bad ideas about how to make the world a better place, very passionate about it, and I'd like to believe eloquent about it. And at this stage in my life, in my mid-30s, I would be somewhere between failed relationship number 4, asking if I want to have relationships in the first place, etc. Okay, this is not confession, and you're not priest, and this is not Sunday, it's Wednesday. But what's my point? My point is, I would be religious. I would just have a very pathetic religion, or based around my feelings and whoever brainwashed me first, and based on the values that life's about success. So if marriage gets in the way, then it gets in the way. If my children get in the way, then get in the way. I thank God that even though at times in my life religion did feel stifling, and sometimes till today, I am so grateful that I grew up in an environment in which these were the values that were taught naturally and where I gravitated. Because I would never gravitate there, I don't think so, if I wasn't born there. I was born there and I got introduced to it, so I was able to gravitate there. And to at least choose a religion that for me, and you could feel free to disagree, it makes sense. And it's, even if it doesn't make sense, it's not about me. Any religion that's not about me and I'm not at the center of the universe is a pretty good religion. But it can't be about another human being either. In other words, if I had to choose a religion between putting a politician or a celebrity or a sport, success story versus me as a central religion, I would still choose me. At least, I'd like to believe I have a little more values than they do. Not I as in Levi, but most of us. But why would I choose a fallible human being and a fallible idea? Because that's what most ideas are. They're ideas that sound so thrilling one day, and then they sound so pathetic a year later or a decade later. So many of the ideas that people gave their life up for in the last 5,000 years, they dedicated their life to this idea. They fought for it. They lost sleep over it. They lost their lives over it. Were such stupid ideas in hindsight. I mean, I appreciate the virtue, and some of the ideas that people fought for were decent. But I would say the majority of ideas that have come up in the universe and people have died for, pretty stupid stuff. So before you become religious about an idea, don't you at least want to know that it's not just a truth for today, but it's a truth for all time? And for me, that's the gift of believing in a God that was here, is here, and will be here forever. Because what that means is that his knowledge and his knowledge, it's such a stupid word, the values he asks us to adapt are eternal. They go throughout the ages. They're for all time and for all people. Versus, if all I do is just like follow celebrities, oh my gosh, the way that person hits the tennis ball or the cricket ball, the way she runs, and the triathlons, and look at those muscles. I'm like, really? That's my religion? To build up muscles or to worship people with muscles or with skill? I mean, it's nice. It's nice to see people with skill, 100%. But that's who my universe will surround. And even if it's me, my own body, why would I surround my universe around my body, which is going to get older and more tired as I get older and more tired? Why would that be the center of the universe if it's not stable? Why would my money be the center of the universe if it's not stable? Why would my fame, popularity, good looks be the center of my universe? Why would I base anything in my life around something that is not consistent and not true? There's a halachic term. which refers to lying rivers. Lying as in sheker, a lie, a fib, a falsehood. The false river, and it has halachic ramifications. Just as a side note, when a person, when they used to prepare the red heifer, they had to get water from living waters and not from false waters. What was false waters? Any river that dries up once in 7 years is false. Basically, it has to show that it can last longer than 7 years. Falsehood is not something that proves itself false after 5 minutes. It could take years. So how do you know if something's false or true? Where does it come from? And is it time tested? And that's why, by the way, religious people, I'm talking about spiritually religious, are not the first people to adapt to every change. And other people see it as a criticism. Oh my gosh, what's with you, rabbis? Why don't you come on with the world? You're like, 1 second. I have time-tested values and principles that have lasted for 5,000 years. You now want me to adapt to this principle that's just come onto the universe last month, and that's called being slick, woke, with it? Why? On the contrary, why do I have to be the first person to go down the rabbit hole? If I have something that's time tested, I'll stick with that until this thing proves itself that it does not contradict my time tested values. So no, I don't believe as a religious person I have to be the first person that adapts every new technology. I have to see it first. Now, yes, we adapt to Zoom. Fair enough. But within the confines. No Orthodox rabbi has allowed Shabbos or Yom Tov services on Zoom. But adapt is what people tell me, and they mean it well intentionally. Why? For 4,000 years, we haven't used whatever electricity there was at the time, or the last 200 years definitely, and we're doing just fine. Why do you think we have to adapt now? And why do you think adaptation won't backfire? The gift of being a Jew with a history is we have enough perspective. When I hear guys freaking out about the election today based on who's going to win, yes, it's entertaining. I found it very entertaining today to watch. The end of the world if this guy wins, end again. We have been here so long and have such a broad perspective that honestly thinking that the universe starts here or ends here is so pathetic. Not only is it pathetic, it's dangerous. Because back to the original idea, we should be a generation that's focused on self. I don't see the fact that we're the I generation as a problem. On the contrary, I would encourage it. We're not focused enough on I. We're still seeing saviors in politicians or in celebrities or in the newest technology. No, we should focus inward. We are the first generation that should be truly empowered to go on our own journey, not to follow others like a bunch of sheep to slaughter. But that's what happens when you go on social media, everybody agrees with everybody. And if you don't agree, you just go to a different social media feed and then you start agreeing. 1 second. Instead of this being the most empowered generation of individualistic thought and journey and integrity and objective thought, the journey for truth, we're just sitting and watching Netflix and just following along with the newest trends. And you're like, 1 second. If people did this 500 years ago before, the book revolution and before access to knowledge, it's one thing. But we have access to knowledge. Not only we have books, we have the internet. And yet, over 30% of internet searches are for pornography. Another who knows how much percent of internet searches is for news and for social media wasting our time. You're like, 1 second. You were given the gift of the internet and you decided to do what? I'm talking to myself as much as anyone. In other words, we've been given the ability to access the highest levels of ourselves, knowledge, to search. For Jewishly, you have more access to Torah knowledge than ever before in history because almost everything's translated into English. But how much learning are we doing every day compared to what we can? This could have been the time that we were the most self-fulfilled, not in a selfish way, not in a chase your dreams, honey, everything's possible garbage. I'm sorry, I find that so pathetic. Don't chase your dreams. Ask yourself what you're here for. The world is not your oyster. That's such a selfish, self-focused idea. No, the world is waiting for you to make your contribution, but not from a place of patronizing, but a place of humility, knowing that you just have something to contribute. This could be the generation of people who are so empowered, and yet everyone I meet, almost everyone, struggles with self-esteem, struggles with self-value, questions their role in this world, questions, so much. And you're like, why? And I'm talking to myself. And, I have many, colleagues and friends, Rabbanim and this and that. And I'll be honest, it's amongst us as well. I have a friend, I always tell him, if you believed in yourself 5% more, you would change the world for the better. The issues of our time have nothing to do, they're big, but they're not really about populism and leftism and, what's the coolest movie that just came out and what's the new fashion color from France and Italy. And the real issues of our time, friends, is are we playing our part? Are we locked into ourselves? Are we religious on values that are not temporary, but values that are eternal? Is what I stand for something that I'll be proud that I stood for in 10 years from now? I'll tell you why it gets to me. First of all, because I see so many people I know go nutty about the election, but that's not really what bothers me. What truly bothers me, if I'm honest, is how disempowered we feel. How, I spoke about this on Monday, how unself-aware we are. How we're so not plugged into our potential. Not our potential for success, our potential for living authentic, true, decent lives. This could have been one of the best things that ever happened to me. In some ways, it still is. I get to network with my community. I get to hopefully make a difference in people's lives. But it's also one of the biggest destroyers of my life. I've been given tools. You have been given tools, this generation, that your ancestors would have considered messianic. But what? What have we done with them? We're in 2020. We're 20 years into the world of the 21st century, into the world of social media, into the world of smartphones. Where are we, guys? That's where I've been asking myself every single day the last week. And COVID, which I so prayed would be the answer to so much of this, wasn't. It didn't really change us. Why? Because you know what? One thing I've learned, even with COVID, that brought challenges and good things to us. Until we want to change, we're not going to change. Until all of us, I'm not saying all of us, the few of us here on this shir, but as humanity, until all of us don't decide that we want to get our act together and go back to strong values, we're just going to flounder from election to election, from crisis to crisis, from fashion to fashion, from panic to panic. Should we emigrate? Should we not? We're floundering. was a great analogy that, that one of the great, a mentor of many Hasidic Jews, his name was Rabbi Mendel Futerfas. I've read this before. He was arrested in Soviet Russia and he spent many years in prison, 20 years almost. And when he came out and he eventually moved over to Israel, he became a mentor of students, and he would share many analogies and stories from his time in prison in Russia. And those stories have very much become a bedrock of narratives that parents tell their students and their children and teachers tell their students. I grew up on some of the ideas of this very wise fellow, Rabbi Mendel Futerfas. And he shares a story that one of the guys that was with him in prison, because, Stalin was afraid of anybody with half a talent and half a brain, so all the intellectuals and all the talented people were thrown into the gulags or killed. And one of these guys was a fellow who used to work in a circus, and his job was to be a tightrope walker. And Ramendel was fascinated by this idea of like a tightrope walker. It's like, it's quite a skill. And this guy would put up tightropes, in the prison, in the camp, and give guys shows, and everybody would clap, And at some stage, Ramendel asked him, said, tell me, what's the art? Obviously, balance is important. You need the skill of balance. We get it. But what's the art of what you do? He says, no. Mendel, what do you think it is? So Mendel says, I think you stare at the pole in front of you the whole time, and you just follow that pole, and that focus allows you to keep your focus and not fall from fear and to just keep your skill. He says, very good. So he turns to Mendel and says, so based on that, what would you say the hardest part of the act is? He says, when you reach the pole and now you have to turn around, for that moment that you're turning around, you don't have a pole to look at. So you don't know where your goal is. He says, what? Very good. That's the toughest moment of the act. And what Ramendel used to say, it's self-explanatory. If you know where you're going, then you can walk a tightrope. If you know where you're going, you can walk very far on a very narrow bridge. But if we don't know where we're going, if there is no destination, then even if it's the widest bridge, we're not going to know what's front, back, right, or left. So my thoughts for today are, let's remember where we're going. Let's have that pole in front of our eyes every day as our days get stressful, each day with its challenges, load shedding, violence, financial worry, marital strife, nachas issues, health issues, the full gamut of experience. Keep the pole in front of you. It's the best way to live. Shkoyach, everybody. Thank you so much.